Welcome to Birds.Bees.Bodies, a Planned Parenthood of Southeast and North Florida podcast where we break barriers, tear down stigmas, and promote open discussions on sexual and reproductive health. Get the buzz on topics from puberty to menopause, contraception to conception. No topic is off limits. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into a judgment-free zone to promote sexual wellness. Welcome, everyone, to our podcast, Birds, Bees, Bodies, brought to you by Planned Parenthood of Southeast and North Florida. I'm Michelle Casada, Vice President of Communications and your host for today's podcast. And today we're talking about a very interesting topic. We're continuing our Mental Health Awareness Month conversations, and we're talking about really anything that has to do with the journey to parenthood. And in order to start the conversation, we have welcomed Janet Santiago. She's our Behavioral Health Program Director, and Bailey, our Marketing and Communications Manager, who's also a new mom of twins. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being on. I want to start with just giving some brief backgrounds and your experience, with the journey to parenthood and your work with patients who have had troubling issues as we all had in different phases of journeyhood to parenthood. Janet, if you want to share a little background on yourself.
Yes, hi. So my name is Janet Santiago. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a certified trauma professional. I have been in this field for about 15 years, and I've worked with people of all ages across all areas of the lifespan. I also am a mom of twins and a 19-year-old. So I've been a parent. I've been through the journey.
I didn't know that, Janet.
I didn't know she had twins either.
Hello, mom.
Yep. So I'm here if you have any questions about twins, because it's not easy. But like I said, I've been through it personally. I've worked with people that are all stages of parenthood, from preconception to their kids have moved out, and now what do I do? So, that's my focus.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll have to ask you about the twin stuff because I did not know that either. So Bailey is also our communications and marketing manager. She works on the comms team with me. We're so happy to have her on the podcast. And Bailey's a new mom, as you heard, of twins. So Bailey's going to bring a different perspective. Bailey, talk a little bit about yourself and just, your work with Planned Parenthood and beyond.
Yeah, I'm Bailey. Like Michelle said, I've had the pleasure of being the comms and marketing manager almost 2 years now here at PP Sinful. And like she said, I'm a new mom to twins. The girls just turned a year about 2 weeks ago, which is insane. So doing it a little while, but still feels fairly new. And I'm also somebody that struggled with their mental health their whole life, including throughout my pregnancy and into postpartum. So really looking forward to this conversation today, and I'm grateful for it. And I think a lot of people are going to be.
Wonderful. And, I think that we always forget, even my son is 2 and I still consider myself a new mom. I feel like in those early years, everything is so fresh. And I still remember, being pregnant with him, the first few weeks, the sleep deprivation, everything that comes with finding yourself. There's so many phases to this journey to parenthood. And I want to start with the very first initial phase, which for most people, if they're planning a pregnancy, it's the trying to conceive part. And I know that, I'm actually, in full disclosure, I'm pregnant now. I'm 18 weeks pregnant with my second child. And this one happened much faster. We did plan it, but we did not realize how quickly it was going to take to get pregnant. But the first time around, my son, we did experience, 2 miscarriages prior to being able to conceive our son and be able to have our son. So there's a lot that happens in that trying to conceive period. Janet, what do you see patients, coming to you with what kind of issues? Like, how do you navigate this? I know it's very challenging.
Well, when attempting to conceive, one of the biggest things that I've seen is the high levels of stress and anxiety and worry. Which a lot of people don't know that, biologically that leads to high levels of cortisol in the system. And with those high levels of cortisol, our hormone levels are affected, our menstrual cycles, our ability to ovulate, even with men, sperm production is impacted by high levels of cortisol. So what we've seen is this cycle of high levels of stress, of a lot of pressure and worry and anxiety about conceiving, which is also preventing the conception. So there's this whole cycle, and the stress really impacts your ability to not only conceive, but what happens throughout the pregnancy as well, and how that impacts the fetus.
Bailey, you learned early on that you were pregnant with twins.
Was that
Yeah.
a whole other world within itself?
It was the first ultrasound, which usually they can't even see the sacs well enough to see the two distinct, the sacs. But yeah, and I'll tell you, I think a lot of things we were worried about. We were worried, the pregnancy would be gone, I would miscarry, et cetera, but multiples was not on our radar whatsoever. And so, as excited as we were, it came with some grief too, if I'll be honest, that we didn't plan for a multiples pregnancy. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that meant for my body, for our future, et cetera. So I just think it can be a lot of information to handle.
What are some of the mental health challenges that you'll see early on in pregnancy, Janet? Like, obviously there's some excitement for a lot of people. There's a lot of anxiety, fear. Like, what are some of the things that can spiral from that?
So, Bailey touched on one, which is really important, which is that grief, right? And this can happen even for people that were planning it, that were expecting to have a baby and were hoping for it. We're surprised by the grief because grief really comes as a result of just a change that has happened. That means that we're losing something we thought we were going to have, whether that's a vision, a goal, or even just our independence, right? It could be your first kid, for example, and you had all this freedom to go out whenever you feel like it and, go on trips and things like that. And now all of your time and focus and money and energy is focused on the baby. So that can create some grief that's unexpected for people. There can be a lot of feelings of self-blame, guilt, especially if there's a miscarriage, right? Am I doing this right? Am I eating right? Am I sleeping enough? All this worry and guilt and shame and self-blame if something does go wrong, or if the baby's born with a genetic issue or anything like that. Anxiety and fear are the biggest ones though, right? What's coming? I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know, are my partner and I, if I have a partner, are we going to be able to handle this together? Is this going to make us stronger? Or is this going to break us? Am I going to know what to do the first time the baby cries or gets injured? So there's a lot of questions that leads to this constant spiral of what if, what's going to happen? And you have that anxiety.
Add to that too, living in Florida specifically, and maybe this is unique to us because we're within this space and following what's happening to reproductive rights across the state and the nation so closely, but being pregnant towards the end of 2022, early 2023, and watching the 6-week abortion ban come to life in Florida and be filed and passed, in legislature while living under the 15-week ban. Anyone who's carried a multiple pregnancy, any pregnancy, knows that it can be high risk. And so I was also concerned at times for my own health. If something happens, am I going to be able to get care in time? And what does that mean for my husband, et cetera? So I think that just adds another layer of stress to an already stressful situation that frankly we shouldn't have to be worrying and dealing with, but we are.
And there's that increase in cortisol for you, Bailey, right? So chances are you're struggling with sleep and probably some physical issues because cortisol causes those kind of things. So, it's important to remember to use your coping skills and your relaxation techniques because we can't control what's going to happen. So remembering to manage your body's chemistry as well for the baby's health.
And everything you mentioned are just ways that this can manifest, right? And how you display this. But at the same time, here's the crazy part, right? Anybody who has a uterus, you're already going through hormonal changes like throughout your menstrual cycle, throughout your pregnancy, and then now you may actually have, mental health concerns. So how do you tell it apart? Like, I know one of the things for me, and we'll get to postpartum, but one of the things for me, the biggest thing for me postpartum after my son was how much of this is hormones and how much of this is me not being able to adjust? And that is a big question, even throughout pregnancy. Like, am I getting this way because of hormones, or am I getting this way because I need help being able to just categorize what's happening and put it in perspective?
Right. And that's a challenge for each individual that really needs to have a support system, whether that's, a therapist, which we offer, or, it could be a family member, a friend, or even your pastor, just whomever you need to turn to help you process some of these thoughts. Because if you keep them inside and you keep them in your head, they just keep going round and round and there's no real resolution. A lot of times we can feel comfortable with these decisions, comfortable with our thoughts if we can just express them. So if you have no one to bounce these thoughts off of, these worries off of, journaling is a really big one, right? It's just getting it out of your head so that you have another space to reflect on it, whether it's on paper or with another person.
I think that's such a good point quickly, only because as somebody who's recently been struggling and am now starting to re-seek therapy again, and was recently given a diagnosis, trying to figure out medication and all of that. I think and again, somebody who has struggled with her mental health her whole life. So went into all of this thinking I was prepared, I had tools, I had coping skills, etc. And still frankly feel like I landed on my ass. I think I put it off as long as I did because I feel like we're used to thinking about therapy as work because it is work. And it just felt like another thing to do on the list. But the way you said it just now, Janet, as just somebody to talk to, just somebody to bounce ideas off of. I remember even, throughout the last year and talking with friends who are new moms and saying, I'm struggling with this, with that. Even them saying, like, well, have you thought about therapy? Felt like a little bit of like a deflection and like it's now on me as an individual to make myself better for my kids, and it's just another thing to do on the list when really it's just somebody to bounce ideas off of, to talk through the things that you're struggling with. Like, can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the reasons that people who are pregnant, trying to get pregnant, have had the baby, etc., might delay going to therapy? Because I feel like that's really, really important.
Oh, when do you have the time? Right? The diaper, your baby's feeding every 2 hours, right? Like the time is a big one. Lack of resources, right? Thankfully, one of the good things, and I try to always look at the positives, but one of the good things that came out of COVID was so much therapy moved to telehealth. So now it became much more accessible for people. But just having the time, the lack of insurance, the lack of resources, and the biggest one, on all honesty, stigma. It's the stigma of it. There's something wrong with me, right? I'm not crazy. Well, that's not what therapy is. I mean, that may be what it was in the 80s or the 70s or whatever, but that's not what it is now. Now it's support. It's, having someone that's on your side that's going to help you figure these things out that are right for you. And you mentioned, the deflection of friends. That tends to happen because I tend to see this a lot more now where people are very careful about what they're going to say and how they're going to upset someone. And, we live in this cancel culture, right?
Yes.
And I see all the time now, like the moment, I'll see these memes that say, the moment someone crosses a boundary, just cut them off, right? And it frustrates me because that is not the way we can manage relationships. Otherwise, you'd be cutting everyone off and you'd always be isolated. But finding those people that feel comfortable having certain conversations with you, not everyone will. Not every friend wants to talk to you about pregnancy or babies or finances or your relationship, but finding that one person that can talk to you about that. And then maybe you have a different person to talk to you about work, and, having different supports that are not going to toe the line and be careful about what they say because they're worried about offending. So it can be difficult, which is why therapy is so good, because with therapists, we don't have a skin in the game, to be honest with you, right? Like, we're unbiased. We're here listening to your story and just trying to help you figure out how you can solve this and how we can help to empower and strengthen you. And sometimes that's not something we can get from family or friends,
Right.
And that's because you are a good therapist and you have good therapists working with you. I feel like there are people who have tried therapy before. I'm talking about myself. Long time ago, tried it, had a horrible experience. And then it took me several years to even want to get back in and try to find a good therapist that I was compatible with, that I felt comfortable with. So let's just say not all therapists are created equal. Okay. So
I feel like our to talk about postpartum specifically, like our assessment of someone who has postpartum depression, postpartum OCD, postpartum anxiety, whatever form of postpartum they have. For example, I actively went to my former therapist psychologist at 6 months after the girls were born and said, I'm feeling a little bit off. I don't think it's postpartum depression. I'm not sure. And kind of the screening evaluation I was given was basically, are you at risk of harming yourself or your baby? If not, no,
Yeah.
you're good. And so I thought, great, I'm good. No, those two things are not right now, the things that I'm worried about. And so I think in addition to not all therapists being created equal, I don't even know if our systems have caught up with the reality of what moms are facing right now, and or people trying to conceive, going through infertility, going through miscarriage, et cetera. And I do think that's why it's so amazing that Planned Parenthood offers this service now, because that's something we can be competent at that I don't think the rest of the system is.
Right.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the screening, because I remember going through that screening and like the questions were like, are you crying all day? Are you
Right.
thinking about harming your baby? Are you, and like all these things. And I was like, no.
And those things are real. There was probably a time, early postpartum where, yeah, like if you would have asked me that, yeah. But it just so wasn't encompassing, or inquisitive enough about, what was actually happening and what I could do to then help myself.
Yeah. I want to
Right.
take us back for a second, because I do want to spend some time on talking on just postpartum, but I want to take us back to something that you said, Janet. You talked about stigma being a big part of it, but also like the fact that, and I'm going to use a gender specific term here, women are expected to do it all. Like one of the things that I had, stuck in my mind when I was pregnant with my son was, I was built to handle this. I'm supposed to be able to do this. And so society has put these norms that we have to be able to work, be pregnant, take care of the family at home, cook, clean, do all these other things, these societal expectations that if you reach out for help or you say you can't do it all or you're struggling, then you're not woman enough. Then you're not doing it right. And that's another part to it that is aside from therapy. Is that something that you hear it on? Bailey, you're nodding. So it sounds like you went through something similar.
Yeah. Roles are very serious in many families, right? We all play a role. And generationally, culturally, whether it's race, culture, or just where you live or that kind of thing, it can all look very different. And yet, as you said, I think across most cultures, what I've seen is that the woman's role is to care for the child. Doesn't matter where you come from. That's our expectation. Because we have them, we should know how to take care of them. Right?
I wrote something down before this session that I feel like we've been told, good mothers are martyrs and good mothers put themselves last. And culturally, we're supposed to be able to do it all with a smile on our face. And if we die, well, we were a good mother. So, it's just, it's a lot.
Right. Yes.
During pregnancy, right? Like that doesn't hit you as much, right? Because you're still, like caring for yourself. Maybe you're caring for a spouse or another child at home. But like for the most part, for your first pregnancy, you're caring for yourself. You can still take that nap whenever you want. You can still take care of yourself, get that mani-pedi when you want. When that baby comes, though, everything changes, right? And unless you have that village and that support system, it's what Bailey said, like now you're expected to put all those needs behind you and focus on the child and your role as a mother. So I know we've been skirting around the postpartum, but I think we can't escape talking about it. Like this is where I feel like the biggest change happens. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's postpartum depression. We've all heard of it, but a lot of people haven't heard of postpartum anxiety. You don't necessarily have to be depressed. You can be anxious, right? There's symptoms that are going to impact. And when we talk about postpartum, I know we were talking about women specifically, but this also affects the fathers, right? Fathers also go through these different changes. They also have hormonal changes, right? So postpartum affects the family. It's a family issue that has to be addressed. And yet, like you said, many times it's just put on the mom or the mom's too busy. And let's look at it from a different perspective, right? What about those who don't have a partner or who are of such low socioeconomic status that they can't afford to feed themselves nutritiously throughout their pregnancy? Right. And as we know, the mind-gut connection, right? So what we eat is going to impact our mental health. So a pregnant mother who can't afford food to keep herself nutritious is going to impact the baby. It's going to impact her mood. Then she's got to go to work, right? Because there's no dad at home paying the bills. So as I'm pregnant, I'm working all the way up until I have the baby. Then I got to go right back to work.
And no federal or state support on top of it
for
parental leave, childcare, et cetera.
Right. Absolutely. So there's so many different issues, not just the emotional piece of things, but there's so many different issues that impact um, postpartum, right? Whether it's the mother or father, but specifically the pregnant mother um, is going through all those hormonal changes, but then changes in life as well. Um, Not being able to hang out with friends, having to afford all these things, so many different things that impact many people. Then there's postpartum psychosis. I can't miss out on that one. It is rare, but if you do experience it, you need to get immediate help. Okay. And postpartum psychosis looks like severe mood swings, maybe some confusion, some paranoia, hallucinations, delusional thinking. That can happen for some people. And it's extremely important to recognize those symptoms and seek immediate help.
I wanted to chat about the postpartum affecting everyone in the family because I actually have a funny story. Because of course, so much of like after when the baby comes, like, and, as a mom, you obviously know how it impacts you, right? Like you maybe you don't know how you're feeling, you just know you're feeling some type of way. But it's true what you said about like a partner in the house or anything. When my son was a week and a half old, my husband had the opportunity to, and I say opportunity because not every partner gets parental leave, right? So we did have some paternity. It was very minimal. It was 2 weeks, which I think is ridiculous in this country. We need to fix that. But within his 2 weeks of staying home, he was being very helpful. And he just got this, like, I just call it a midlife crisis where he started organizing the entire garage. And I'm like, breastfeeding, pumping, changing diapers, like not sleeping. It's during the day. Yeah, this was so important.
It was nesting.
He had to organize the garage and like all the totes where we had our Halloween stuff, our Christmas stuff. Like he reorganized everything. He bought matching totes so they all look the same. And I'm just like thinking to myself, like, what is happening? Like, I'm here, I need support, and here you are. But that was his way of coping and being useful in the moment when he couldn't breastfeed. He was trying to like help out any way we could. And he was like, okay, well, this might make Michelle happy, or this might make us happy to just have the garage organized. So it's funny how it manifests in different ways.
Sounds like postpartum anxiety to me.
Yeah,
absolutely. And he was looking for whatever he could contribute, like you said, and whatever he has control of. Because remember, when we're anxious, it's because we feel like we're out of control. So chances are that's what he was looking for. What can I do that I have control over? And tell him anytime he's anxious, my garage could use the same organization.
I'll send him over. He did a great job.
Could you, Janet, that just made me think of, because I think sometimes people don't even know if they're anxious or depressed or what they're feeling. They're just feeling it so intensely. Can you talk about, so you said anxiety is feeling like you're out of control. Like, what does depression feel like? What does like sensory overload feel like? And then in addition to talk therapy, what are some things that people can do to help with those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So with anxiety, you're going to see a lot of fear, worry, rumination. Irritability is a big part of anxiety as well, right? And when we are anxious, we can become overstimulated. So a lot of noises, a lot of chaos around us, that kind of thing. It stimulates our central nervous system as well and increases that anxiety. Depression, you can see some sadness, right? The crying spells, hopelessness, but it's not the same for everyone. There are people that experience depression that have complete apathy. It's like they're empty and they describe it as a void or an emptiness, right? So yeah, so depression doesn't necessarily need to look like depression. I think we all know who Robin Williams is, right? Always smiling, always laughing, and yet we know that he suffered from depression. So depression is a little bit harder to pick up on people if they're skilled at hiding it. Anxiety, you can pick up from a lot of the physical movements, right? The shaking of the leg or constantly clicking a pen, looking around, their eyes are constantly darting. So there's other symptoms for anxiety that we can look for.
Looking at your phone constantly.
Looking at your phone constantly, yes. Absolutely. You'll see the mood shifts as well as the appetite and the ability to sleep. And especially, when we're talking about pregnancy and postpartum and all that, there's huge sleep deprivation. You're not getting a lot of sleep. And when that happens, your brain is not healing itself. Your body is not healing itself because you're not going through REM and deep sleep. So then you're just continuing those heavy feelings from yesterday into today. and then tomorrow, and you're just compounding day after day, so it builds up until eventually there's an explosion, because most of the time anger is anxiety. So there's a lot that we look for when it comes to anxiety and depression in physical symptoms and um, the emotional manifestation of it.
And so people struggling with those things, who, like me, just couldn't imagine finding time in the day to address it, knew I needed to, but just when and how. Are there things that they can do, tools, to help them cope in the interim if they're not able to access talk therapy, whether that's because of finances or time, or are there just other things that people can do if seeking a therapist maybe isn't an option right now?
Absolutely. There are so many resources online. There's so many different apps. I mean, here at work, we have the Calm app, right? That's something that's provided to all staff. And it's an amazing app that helps you with some meditation, some breathing, things like that. But aside from looking things up online for yourself, right, there's simple things that you can do throughout your day, even as you're doing tasks. The most simplest, and most people like roll their eyes when I say this, deep breathing. As crazy as that sounds, deep breathing actually regulates our central nervous system. So taking all those big deep breaths and holding it and then out. And there's different techniques, right? There's the 4-second breathing where you breathe in through your nose to the count of 4, you hold it to the count of 4, breathe out through your mouth to the count of 4. For me, the numbers really don't matter as long as you're regulating and slowing down your breathing, but it's different for everyone. Doing some muscle relaxation, right? Just recognizing, kind of doing a quick body scan and recognizing, where am I carrying tension? Are my shoulders tense? Am I clenching my teeth? Right? Am I balling my fists? That kind of thing. And doing a quick body scan from head to toe and releasing that tension. So these are things that you can do while you're folding laundry, while you're breastfeeding, while you're washing dishes. They're not things that take a lot of effort. They just take a lot of repetition.
Well, and what I love is that they work for really anyone in any phase of parenthood. So whether you're trying to conceive, whether you're pregnant, whether you're a new mom, a new parent, all of those things, are applicable. So
absolutely. And the diet and nutrition is extremely important, right? Just increasing your water intake, having a few pieces of fruit, things like that. It's going to be extremely important. These are small things that everyone has control over, and you don't need a therapist to be able to do.
Which is so hard because you just want coffee because you're so tired. But
absolutely,
you need water. Yes.
To start
doing all these things that you forget to eat. And then my reminder is always my husband. He's like, have you eaten today? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm snappy because I haven't had anything to eat.
Right. Which is why it's so important to plan these things ahead, right? Because if we're just going to do it based on when I feel hungry or when the baby's hungry, it's not going to happen. Right. You've got to plan ahead for it. And then tying some of those habits with existing habits, like the deep breathing, practicing that so that it becomes more of muscle memory. When you're washing dishes, reminding yourself, hey, every time I wash dishes, I'm going to practice a few deep breaths, right? Or right before I drink my cup of coffee. This is how I started drinking water, because I love coffee too. But before I'm allowed to have my first cup of water in the morning, I have to have, or my first cup of coffee, I'm sorry, I have to have my first cup of water.
Gotcha.
So just kind of tying some of the new habits and starting small, something very easy that's not going to feel too much of a burden because you've got so many other things that you're dealing with, but starting small and tying those to habits you're already doing usually makes you much more successful.
Let's chat for a moment about the things that you don't expect postpartum, because I feel like anybody who's ever been pregnant, who has friends who have been pregnant or family who have been pregnant, will tell you, oh, we'll get ready for like the sleep deprivation, changing diapers, like the teething. Like they tell you about all the stuff that you can expect. Nobody tells you how you maybe will lose yourself and you don't know who you are, and the struggle that it takes to like know, am I the same person? Am I a new person? Like, do I take care of myself? Do I not take care of myself? Let's chat about that. And I know that there's no simple fix for that, but maybe there's some coping skills or something that you can do ahead of time. If you're able to do talk therapy, it's incredible. Like that's honestly what helped pull me out of my hole, and help me kind of become a normal person again. And I use normal very, very lightly, but just like more myself. Let's talk about that for a second, because that is not something anyone prepared me for.
Right. So relationship strains, right? Most people don't see that coming. And a lot of my clients, I tell them, I heard this fact when I was in grad school, and it always stuck with me. In my women's studies course, the professor asked us, what was the number one reason for divorce? And everyone raised their hands, finances and infidelity and all that. And she says, no, it's actually kids, because kids is what leads to all that other stuff, right? Before we had kids, we could afford our trips and we could afford to go on our date nights and all that. Now we got to save for the kids' college fund, right? So now all of mom's attention is being given to baby, right? And the partner's not getting any attention. So they're feeling jealous and left out. Causes a lot of strain within relationships. Wonderful news is, if you can make it through the child rearing years, on the other side of it, you go through another honeymoon phase, because we made it, right? We got through this war together. We're comrades. So I say that to tell all parents out there, don't get discouraged, stick together, make it through, and you'll be that much stronger and closer at the end of it. Losing our identity is a big one, right? So like I said earlier, I've worked with people in all stages of life. And a lot of times those parents who are more in my stage of life, where kids are like grown, finished college, they're moving out of the house. Now it's like, okay, well, what do I do? What do I do with my time, right? I don't have sports to run around to. I don't have tutoring to get to and all this other stuff. So what do I do with myself? Who am I? And we go through this little bit of a midlife crisis of trying to figure out who you were before you had kids and they completely changed you. And how can we get back to some of that? That's something that a lot of people don't realize. Social isolation, right? If you have parents, or you're a parent of little kids and your friends don't have little kids, who wants to go out to brunch with a crying baby, right? Like that's a lot of the attitude that we tend to see that we don't expect. So now our friends are making plans without us because they don't want a kid along, right? So,
What's interesting is I had a similar but opposite experience where I was the last person in my friend group to have kids, and everyone is so busy with their kids that being a new mom and being the last one to do it, I felt very isolated, but it wasn't because no one had kids, it was because everyone had kids. So that was something that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. And I think it's something to do too with just being up in the middle of the night and no one else in the world is up except for you and this baby, it feels like. And then your partner likely goes back to work before you if you have a partner. And then I don't know, there's just so many different little moments where it can feel lonely, or something even more specific. I think maybe it's like a sub to the loneliness, like a subcategory to the loneliness, but like feelings of being overlooked too. I know you mentioned like the partner feeling overlooked because you're now with the baby all the time, but there was also something to, I remember I was still in the hospital and the girls' grandparents, as every grandparent would and should, had posted to social media that they were here and they were healthy, and they were just so excited to meet them. But there was nothing about me in the post. There wasn't anything about how I was doing or the fact that I had just given everything to bring these two lives into the world. And I remember thinking, like, is this where it starts, where and there's some beauty to that, right? Like, it is about them now, but there was just this feeling of being overlooked too. And I just wonder if that's something other people struggle with too.
100%. 100%. Like, and I, that's still something that I'm learning in my new relationship with my mom. And I say new because now I'm a mom myself. So now I have a relationship with her with a different perspective. And like my whole life, it's always been about me and my sister, me and my sister. And now that I have this like beautiful little boy, they're proud grandparents. They're so excited. And I think they're the best grandparents ever. But sometimes I feel like sometimes I just need you to be my mom again. You know what I mean? So like, I want you to be grandma, but I want you to also be my mom. And so, yeah, I think moms go through that where maybe the family rallied around them while they were pregnant because all the attention was on them. And then baby's born and now all the attention is on the baby and mom is overlooked.
Right. Absolutely. And then we look at the flip side of that. What about those parents that didn't want the baby? And yet, because of all these abortion bans, now they have to have them.
Absolutely.
Right? So now there's this disconnect from the mom and the child, and these feelings of resentment of I have to take care of you and I didn't even want you, right? And then there's this attachment that's created. So now we're developing emotional emotional issues in the infant as well as attachment issues, possibly personality disorders. We're creating a new generation of people that are going to have mental health issues because there's parents being forced to have kids that are unwanted, unfortunately, or unplanned.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I did want us to get to the abortion restrictions in Florida and how this impacts parenthood moving forward, and not just unintended pregnancies, but how abortion restrictions impact IVF, how they impact intended pregnancies. Should there be a complication and you have to make the decision to abort a pregnancy, but now you can't because the law says you can't. Talk about how can people cope with this? I mean, we've already had hundreds of women across the state that have been, over the 6-week gestational age and can't get an abortion in Florida and did not intend to be pregnant, do not want the pregnancy for many reasons. It could be health reasons, it could be personal reasons. Every reason is valid. But now they have this. They're trying to navigate the state telling them they can't get health care, and they also have to navigate the emotional and mental distress that comes with that.
Absolutely. First and foremost, get into therapy. Get into some sort of counseling with someone who may have information about resources that may be available to you, with someone who's going to be available to talk to you about the stressors that you're going through and what this is going to look like, with someone that you trust to help you make a plan for how are we going to, either raise this baby moving forward, or do we want to give the baby up for adoption? Do we need to find, that option? But just making sure that you are connected with someone that can not only talk to you about these things, but help you find the resources that you need. That's going to be first and foremost. Education is going to be huge, right? We for sure need to make sure that we are educating people about these bans and how they're impacting, as well as ways to prevent unwanted pregnancies. One of the things that I absolutely love about us is our prevention pack, right? That prevention pack makes it so much more affordable for people to get the Plan B without having to worry about, paying $60 out of pocket. That's crazy to me, right? And there's so many people that can't afford that. So making sure that there's awareness about that and that those resources are available to people. I know we do telehealth and we can mail some things out, things like that, making sure that all of this is accessible. That's so important.
And I think that might be a myth that we're slowly trying to chip away at. Something that I even repeated earlier, that I don't have time for this, I can't afford this. I think to your point, Janet, we're trying to be, and we are, as accessible as is possible. And we are an option for people. They just, have to know about us.
And we have all of those compassionate therapists working for us for Planned Parenthood who have niche experiences in different phases of life that can help you through this. Once you find the right person to talk to, it is a game changer.
I think that the thing that I've struggled with the most, all the way through, while trying to get pregnant, while pregnant, and then postpartum, it's almost like this feeling like, am I crazy? Like, because it is all so hard, and there is so much pressure, whether it's the pressure to conceive, whether it's the pressure to keep the pregnancy, whether it's the pressure to bounce back postpartum. I mean, and not to say that pressure is made up, or pressure that we put on ourselves. We talked about how it's cultural, it's societal, and it is, at the end of the day, one of the most important jobs is raising another human being. I mean, it's profound, that's what we're doing. And so I think the more that I've been able to reframe therapy as it's not that I'm so sick that I can't figure this out myself. It's not that I'm failing as a mother or as a wife, it's just that this is a lot. This is really more than any one person can handle, especially with the way our country is set up and with what little resources and support we give pregnant families and pregnant people going through this. That has just really helped me to remember that this is just something that everyone can benefit from.
One of the things, and maybe other people in my generation feel the same way, like our parents, and their parents always thought, well, we don't need therapy. Like, why don't you just work it out yourself? You can handle it. And that's a different generational perspective about, and then they found, some healthy methods to cope and some unhealthy methods to cope, depending on their perspective of things. But And like you said before, Bailey, we have this thought that being a mother is you have to be a martyr and you have to put everyone before yourself, and you don't have to do that. Like, yes, we may have seen our parents do that, but they also, had maybe other things in childhood that you weren't happy with how they handled things, right? Because they didn't make time for themselves. So you don't have to be that person. You can be whoever you want to be and whatever kind of mom you want to be, just making sure that you take care of yourself.
Right. And there's finite energy. Like there's choices, there's opportunity cost. And I think the more that you say, I'm cutting myself from the list, and because that's what we do, we just keep moving ourselves further and further down, it actually ends up becoming harder to do anything on the list at all. At least in my experience. So
there's a reason why they tell you to put your gas mask on before you put on the person's next to you, right? Exactly. If you cannot carry it, how do you expect to help anyone else carry theirs?
Exactly.
You have to take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wish we had more time, because honestly, we could talk about this all day. Especially the abortion bans and restrictions and how terrifying that is for even myself. I'm in an intended planned pregnancy, and I'm doing my anatomy scan in a few weeks, and it's always something that crosses my mind, any complication that can happen, and you can't get the care that you need in Florida because of what's happening with these laws, and doctors just getting their hands tied in cases where they should just be able to offer care, and everything else that comes with postpartum, the journey to parenthood, even after, right? Like Janet mentioned, the empty nest, which I hope I still have a long time before I have to worry about like jumping through that,
It's much quicker than you would hope, unfortunately.
Yeah. They say don't blink, right? Because they're like graduating from high school by the time you blink. So I agree. Parenthood is a beautiful journey for those who want to be on it. And I think that there's so many great things we talked about. There are more resources for anyone listening to this podcast. Please go to our website, ppsenfl.org. That stands for Planned Parenthood Southeast North Florida.org. You can also follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, or on Threads. We're on TikTok. Just look at ppsenfl, and we'll be able to share resources with you like we always do. Our behavioral health team, our mental health team is extremely incredible. Like, they are a group of compassionate therapists. Therapy is affordable with Planned Parenthood. And what do you have to lose? You try it. If you don't like it, then you don't like it, but you try it and you will be impressed by our therapists, by our program, and all of the options. I don't want to forget to mention we have support groups as well. And Janet, we have a new support group just about this, right? Journey to Parenthood. Do you want to chat a few seconds about what that support group entails?
Absolutely. So just like you said, Journey to Parenthood. So in this support group, it is anything to do with parenthood, whether it's trying to get pregnant and conceive, whether it's you're in the middle of your pregnancy or your kid's, 3, 4, 5 years old and you don't know what to do. There's really no limit. We are here to support all parents at whatever phase of their journey they're in, whether that's in individual sessions or in group counseling. We're just here. We're here to support.
Wonderful. And you can learn more on our website. Thank you all so much for being a part of the discussion. Janet, Bailey, thank you so much for adding your perspectives, your expertise. There's so many different things that we go through in this phase of life if you're trying to become a parent or you are a parent. And so we're here for you no matter what. So I appreciate you all so much. If you enjoy our content with our Birds.Bees.Bodies podcast, please leave a comment, leave some feedback on our apps, whether Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, on YouTube, on Instagram. If you want to check us out, it's extremely helpful for us to know what you like and what you enjoy. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.